Hello. Today we're going to hit some of my favorite chapters in the Old Testament. We're going to be looking at God's response to Job and the friends. We're going to start in chapter 38, so let's get going. So remember back, Job wants to know, why is this happening to me? People ask that all the time. Listen to see if his question's answered. God is going to settle the dispute, but he's going to do it in his way. Remember in the last couple chapters, Elihu used the picture of a storm. And some commentaries say that there is an actual storm going on. Well, here is that storm as it continues, and it's bringing God with it. Chapter 38, verse 1 says, "Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said," so the word for God here is different. El has been used as the word for God from chapter 3 on to this. Now it switches to Yahweh. It is the personal name for God, his covenant name, the great I am. In English, when you look in the Bible and you see Lord in all capitals, that is this, Yahweh. He's speaking his personal relationship name. So a whirlwind is frequently used to represent God because of its power, and it's something man can't control. Look at things that are happening around us now. Look at tornadoes and their destructive power, and we have nothing that can stop it. Remember that Job's troubles all started with a great whirlwind that killed his children. So notice who God is not talking to here. He's not talking to the friends. He is talking to Job. So a couple possible reasons. Job is the one that was wrongly accused by the friends. And he is the only one in the group to actively cry out to God. Everybody was talking about God, only Job talked to God. Now God is going to talk back to Job. He is going to ask Job 77 questions in these next few chapters. Verse 2 and 3 say, Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Now, wouldn't you be quick and in your boots if you heard God say that? So, who do you think God means here? Some say Job. Some say Elihu. Some say Job, Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Elihu all spoke without knowing what's really going on. They weren't part of the conversations in chapters 1 and 2. But in verse 1, it says, God said to Job. It's probably not that he expected them to know something they couldn't know, but he wanted them to acknowledge they didn't know and not speak as if they knew. Dress for action. Our interpretation would be, put on your big girl panties here and get ready. Some versions say gird up. So you think about the typical Jewish garment you've seen in pictures. Imagine trying to run in that. So what they would do is take the back of their robe and pull it up through their legs and tuck it into the waistband, making trousers. So to gird your loins means get ready for battle. Job had insisted that God bring answers to him, and now God is turning this around. Now you answer me. Now come the questions that Job will have no answer to. He can't. How ridiculous it is that we can think we can teach God anything. And that's kind of what the friends have been doing all along. Verses 4 through 7 say, Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? What were its bases sunk? And who laid its cornerstone? when the morning stars sang together and all the songs of joy of God shouted for joy? What's the answer? Where was Job when all this was going on? Not there. The idea here is that Job, if you can answer these things, then you can question me. But of course, Job can't. Surprise! God knows what he's doing in the universe. These questions remind Job that there was so much he didn't know. There is so much we don't know. Verse 4 confirms that God is the creator of heaven and earth as recorded in Genesis 1. It talks about measurements in verse 5. God's measurements are exact. Think about how our own solar system works. If a planet went off course, what would happen? But they are moving as God designed them. Verse 5, when God says, surely you know, is so sarcastic. God knows, Job doesn't. Verse 5, stretching the line on it, that's how they used to measure for construction. They would take a piece of rope or twine or something, and they would put chalk on it, and they would stretch the rope and mark it with the chalk on the rope. I believe there's construction that still does that kind of thing. So morning stars and the sons of God, talking about angels. That shows that angels were around for the creation of the earth. They were really happy about it. Notice though, there's nothing in here that says God consulted with the angels to ask their opinions. They were just part of the audience getting to watch the show. Verse 8 through 11 says, or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it and set bars and doors, and said, thus far you shall come and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed. So this strophe is dealing with salt water, seawater. God will talk about fresh water later. Verse 8 is probably referring to the second day of creation. You can find that in Genesis 1, 6 through 8, when God divided the waters. And then remember, God sent a worldwide flood. He let the water loose, and then he established the boundaries of the water back to normal again. Verse 9 is talking about fog. Genesis 1, 2 also talks about fog on the earth. So the answer for Job is, of course he doesn't know how God set the boundaries for how far the sea could go. So another thing in the negative column for Job. Verses 12 through 18 say, and have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the skirts of the earth and the wicked be shaken out of it? It is changed like clay under the seal, and its features stand out like a garment. For the wicked their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all this. So this strophe is about heavenly lights. Verse 15 is about how the evil prefer to do their work in the darkness. And verse 16, God is asking Job if he'd ever taken a stroll on the ocean floor. It talks about springs of the sea. Job had no way to even know there were springs in the sea. There were no deep sea divers around. We have discovered with more modern science that yes, there are springs in the sea, but God told us about them back in Job. Verse 17 seems to be about Sheol. They viewed Sheol as a prison with gates, and no one returned ever from those gates. Verse 18. Can Job even comprehend the expanse of the earth? The surface of the earth is about 200 million square miles. God knows every inch. But did Job even know 500 square miles? Probably not. He didn't understand the expanse of the earth like God did. And again, if Job can answer these questions, he has the right to question God. Verse 19 through 24. Where is the way to the dwelling of light, and where is the place of darkness, that you may take it to its territory, and that you may discern the paths to its home? You know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? What is the way to this place where the light is distributed, or where the east wind is scattered upon the earth? Even the basic concepts of light and darkness are so over our heads. Where did light start? Where does it come from? And Job didn't have the scientific knowledge we have today. Verse 21 is kind of fun. Let me read that again. For you were born then, and the number of your days is great. God is being so sarcastic here. Who says God can't be fun? God is saying, Job, you're so old and wise that maybe you know the answer. Go ahead, speak up. You were there. My kids like to joke around about me being friends with Moses and things. I'm sure lots of kids do that to their parents. God is doing that to Noah. You're so old. Verse 22 and 23. There are a lot of spectacular times when God uses hail as bombs and missiles from heaven. Look at Exodus 9:24, Joshua 10:11, Isaiah 28:2, Ezekiel 38:22, and Revelation 16:20 through 21. Hail is a weapon. Verses 25 through 30 says, Who has cleft a channel for the torrents of rain, and a way for the thunderbolt, to bring rain on a land where no man is, on the desert in which there is no man, to satisfy the waste and desolate land, and to make the ground sprout with grass? Has the rain a father? Or who has begotten the drops of dew? From whose womb did the ice come forth? And who has given birth to the frost of heaven? The waters become hard like stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. So this is where God is talking about fresh water. Back in chapter 36, Elihu talked about the water cycle as an example of God's greatness. God now asks Job, explain it to me. God shows that man did not cause rain. We've tried. We can seek clouds to help, but it's no guarantee. We can encourage it, but God still makes it rain. He makes it rain out where no person goes, where there are no crops. God makes it rain there too. Even though God gave dominion over the earth to men to care for it, there are places we don't go. Yet God still cares for those places. There are fish at depths we can't go. There's flowers and trees where man has never set foot. Charles Spurgeon said, if both houses of Parliament were to be called together and the Queen were to sit upon her throne of state, and they were unanimously to pass an act ordering the rain to fall, he that sits in the heavens would laugh. We don't control the rain. Verses 31 through 33. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season, or can you guide the bear with its children? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on earth? So now God turns to constellations. The Pleiades are a cluster of 7 stars located in the constellation of Taurus. Orion is a pretty prominent constellation. It's visible throughout the world. Mazzaroth, that usually refers to the signs of the zodiac. Now, the zodiac in itself is not evil. It's just the 12 constellations. It's using the zodiac as astrology or fortune telling. That's what God forbids. The bear is Ursa Major, specifically the star Arcturus. It's the fourth brightest star in the sky. They call it the runaway star because you can actually see it move. Isn't it interesting that God talks about guiding it? God's asking Job if he knows the operating rules of the heavens. Another thing that Job can't explain. Verses 34 through 38 says, "Can you lift up your voice to the clouds that a flood of waters may cover you? Can you send forth lightnings that they may go and say to you, 'Here we are'? Who has put wisdom in the inward parts or given understanding to the mind? Who can number the clouds by wisdom, or who can tilt the waterskins of the heavens when the dust runs into a mass and the clods stick fast together?" So this strophe is about God's control of nature, specifically the clouds, rain, lightning, dust. Verse 35, "Can you send forth lightnings that they may go and say to you, 'Here we are'?" Have you ever thought of lightning saying, "Here we are, we're ready"? Here's an illustration. A mother saw a thunderstorm forming in midnight afternoon, and she was worried about her 7-year-old daughter who was going to be walking home from school 3 blocks. She decided to meet her. The mother saw her daughter just walking around, moseying nonchalantly, stopping to put a big smile on her face whenever the lightning flashed. She spotted her mother and she ran up to her. And when the mother asked her about the big smile every time there was lightning, the daughter explained, "All the way home, God's been taking my picture." That's a great way to look at lightning. The only way man had intelligence and wisdom was because there is an intelligent designer. It's not by random chance. More and more scientists are agreeing that this world was not created haphazardly. There had to be a designer. We know this designer. When it talks about the mind, some versions have the word the ibis or the rooster. These were birds that they thought announced the coming of the rain and the flooding of the Nile. So modern science has made some amazing progress in answering some of God's questions. We know more about the measurements of the earth, but it's still amazing. We know more about the nature of light, yet it's still amazing. We're still, though, so far below God, and we can't really answer these questions. We might have answered some of the little details, but there's still such a huge gap between the knowledge and wisdom of God and man. Verses 39 through 41 says, "Can you hunt the prey for the lion or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in their thicket? Who provides for the raven its prey when its young ones cry to God for help and wander about for lack of food?" So God started off big, asking about the universe. He went to the clouds. He went to the human mind, and now he's down to animal instinct. The point here is that God provides the food for even the wild animals. Job can't do that. Even if you bring this into the modern age and think about zoos or pets, sure, we could feed the animals, but we don't create their food. Even the animal food suppliers don't create food out of nothing. Everything that man creates uses a base material. Only God can create something out of nothing. Let's look at chapter 39, verses 1 through 4. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the does? Can you number the months that they fulfill? And do you know the time when they give birth? When they crash, bring forth their offspring, and are delivered of their young? Their young ones become strong. They grow up in the open. They go out and do not return to them. So this strophe is about the natural order of things in the animal world. God operates the world with such remarkable order and wisdom. Some animals are born and grow up on their own without being cared for by a parent. How does an animal do that? How do they have the instinct to know what to do? How are they able to survive? Who takes care of them? When it talks about the calving of the does, it's talking about an ibex that stands within minutes of birth and then wanders on to strive in the world. They calve in November, December, winter, and it takes about 2 hours. So birth, wander off, and survive on your own. How do they do that? Verses 5 through 8. Who has let the wild donkey go free? Who has loosed the bonds of the swift donkey, to whom I have given the arid plain for his home, and the salt land for his dwelling place? He scorns the tumult of the city. He hears not the shouts of the driver. He ranges the mountains as his pasture, and he searches after every green thing. So this is talking about God's power over animals. We think we have power over some animals, but not necessarily. Some versions use an onager here. That's just another name for a wild donkey. In their world, the wild donkey was admired both for its freedom and its ability to survive under the harshest conditions. Verses 9 through 12. Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Will he spend the night at your manger? Can you bind him in the furrow with ropes, or will he harrow the valleys after you? Will you depend on him because his strength is great, or will you leave him to your labor? Do you have faith in him that he will return your grain and gather it to your threshing hole? If you have a King James Version, it says unicorn. It's probably really an extinct animal called an aurochs. It's been extinct since 1627. It was a humongous animal. It was the most powerful of all hooved beasts. The only animals known that were bigger were a hippopotamus and an elephant. It was the standard symbol of strength in the Old Testament. It's mentioned 9 times. So the picture here for Job is humorous. A wild ox, we can see a wild ox, but can you imagine trying to use a rhino to plow your field? That's the idea it has here. Can you do that? No. Verses 13 through 18. This is a strophe, and the only one without any questions. The wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but are they the pinions of plumage and of love? For she leaves her eggs to the earth and lets them be warmed to the ground, forgetting that a foot may crush them, and the wild beast may trample them. She deals cruelly with her young, as if they were not hers. Though her labor be in vain, yet she has no fear, because God has made her forget wisdom and given her no share in understanding. When she rouses herself to flee, she laughs at the horses and his rider. So basically, this strophe is saying that an ostrich is forgetful, cruel, and really, really foolish and stupid. In fact, there's an Arab saying that says, as stupid as an ostrich. So ostriches are the largest living birds in the world. They range from 5.5 feet tall to 9 feet tall. Even though they have wings, they cannot fly. So the female lays an egg every other day, but she lays it and leaves. They're open to predators right out in the open. Doesn't even try to hide them. During the day, she'll try to defend them, but at night, You can just scare her away. And then the baby ostrich will stay with the mom for about a year, but when it's mating season, Mama ostrich is driving the kids off. You're in my way, kid. Go. And the young ostrich is off on his own. So it talks about the ostrich laughing at the horse and rider. Olympic sprinters run about 23 miles per hour. Horses in the Kentucky Derby run about 35 miles per hour. Over long distances, a horse with a rider can go about 20 miles per hour. Ostriches can run at a speed of 50 miles per hour for about 30 minutes. It's easy to see why she could laugh at a horse and rider. If there is an animal that disproves the theory of survival of the fittest, it could be the ostrich. Why is God bringing this up? Because he has the right to create things the way he creates them. Verse 19 through 25. Do you give the horses his might? Do you clothe his neck with a mane? Do you make him leap like a locust? His majestic snorting is terrifying. His paws in the valley and exults in his strength. He goes out to meet the weapons. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. He does not turn back from the sword. Upon him rattle the quiver, the flashing spear, and the javelin. When with fierceness and rage he swallows the ground, he cannot stand still at the sound of the trumpet. When the trumpet sounds, he says, "Aha!" He smells the battle from afar, the thunder of the captains and the shoutings. Horses are fascinatingly powerful, but Job can't add to the horse's strength. That strength comes from God. Job can't even control him. Even the most well-broken and best trained horse can break from the restraints for the most skilled rider. Remember the last Summer Olympics, there was a disastrous dressage event where a horse just wouldn't obey. This horse had been raised to do this event, and he would not obey. It was torturous to watch. God goes on to explain that the warrior nature of the horse operates against the reason and the self-interest of the horse. Self-interest of the horse is you see a battle, you run the other way, but not horses. Verse 26 through 30. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars and spreads its wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the rock he dwells and makes his home on the rocky crag and stronghold. From there he spies out the prey, and his eyes behold it from far away. His young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there he is. So God turns to birds of prey. Job can't explain the mechanics of flight for these birds. It's talking about the migration of the hawk. The Arabian hawk flies south for the winter. It seems that God wants Job to be astonished at the wildness of all. If mankind has so little authority over nature, could Job have expected to have more control over what's going on in his life? So a fact about eagles in their area are the eagles. Their eyes are about the same size as a human's, but it has about 4 times more sharpness in their vision. They can spot a moving rabbit almost a mile away. And they have 2 centers of focus. They can see both forward and to the side at the same time. Can Job explain how that works? God might seem kind of harsh, but God came to Job as a teacher. Loving, sometimes humorous, vivid and powerful. What God doesn't answer in these questions. He doesn't inform Job of what happened in chapters 1 and 2. He doesn't address the problem of the death of Job's children and servants. He doesn't address Job's legal case, which is what Job was asking about, the unfairness of the situation. He doesn't address the problem of human suffering. He doesn't explain the hiddenness of God. What he does answer, the answer is God. Our world is full of mysteries we can't understand. We need to just trust in his power and his wisdom and his goodness. Tomorrow we'll pick up in chapter 40, where there's a little bit of conversation between God and Job. Thank you again for joining, and please click like and consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you again.